The rain hammered against the windows of Clarence House as Captain Marcus Reed stepped out of his vehicle. He pulled his coat tighter around his uniform, squinting through the downpour at the grand residence before him. It was nearly midnight, an unusual time for a security inspection, but the orders had been clear. Check on the Queen Consort's residence. Make sure everything is secure. Marcus had served in the Royal Guard for 15 years. He had seen many things, protected countless dignitaries, and learned to keep his thoughts to himself. Tonight felt different, though. There was something in the air, a tension he could not quite name. He approached the main entrance where a young guard named Thomas stood at attention. The boy looked nervous, his eyes darting between Marcus and the door. "Everything all right, Thomas?" Marcus asked, noting the slight tremor in the younger man's stance. "Yes, sir. All quiet, sir," Thomas replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Marcus nodded and moved past him into the entrance hall. The interior was dimly lit, with only a few lamps casting long shadows across the marble floors. The staff had retired for the evening, and the usual bustle of activity had given way to an eerie silence. His footsteps echoed as he walked through the familiar corridors, conducting his routine check of the ground floor. Everything appeared normal. Doors locked, windows secured, alarm systems functioning. Marcus was about to sign off on his report when he heard it. A soft sound from upstairs, like something being moved. He froze, listening intently. There it was again, coming from the private chambers on the second floor. Protocol dictated that he should call for backup, but something made him hesitate. Perhaps it was simply a member of staff working late, or the Queen Consort herself unable to sleep. Still, he had his duty. Marcus climbed the grand staircase, his hand instinctively moving to his radio. The second floor was even darker than below. A sliver of light showed beneath one of the doors at the end of the hallway. The private study. Marcus approached carefully, his training taking over. He could hear movement now, more distinct. The sound of drawers opening and closing, the clink of something metallic. He reached the door and knocked firmly. "Security check. Is everything all right in there?" Silence, then hurried movement. Marcus knocked again, louder this time. "I need you to open the door, please." After what felt like an eternity, the door opened. Queen Consort Camilla stood before him, still fully dressed despite the late hour. Her face was flushed, and there was something in her expression Marcus could not quite read. Surprise? Guilt? Fear? "Captain Reed," she said, composing herself quickly. "I was not expecting anyone at this hour. My apologies, Your Majesty. Routine security check. I heard sounds and wanted to ensure your safety." Marcus tried to see past her into the room, but she remained in the doorway, blocking his view. "That is very thorough of you, Captain, but as you can see, I am perfectly fine. Just some late-night reading." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Marcus should have accepted this explanation and left. Any other night he would have. But something was wrong. The metallic sounds he had heard were not consistent with reading. And there was that look in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "Your Majesty, I really must insist on checking the room. It is procedure after a disturbance has been reported." Camilla's expression hardened. "There has been no disturbance, Captain. I am simply working in my own private study." They stood in silence for a moment, locked in a battle of wills. Finally, Camilla stepped aside. "Very well, if you must." Marcus entered the study and his breath caught in his throat. Spread across the large oak desk were jewels. Not just any jewels. Even in the dim lamplight, he recognized them immediately. The coronation necklace, the Delhi Durbar tiara, several brooches he had seen in official portraits. These were pieces from the royal collection, items that had belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth. Some of the pieces lay in open velvet cases. Others were scattered across the desk's surface as if they had been hastily examined. A leather-bound inventory book lay open beside them, filled with handwritten notes. Marcus turned slowly to face Camilla. His mind raced through protocols, procedures, and the gravity of what he was seeing. The late Queen's personal jewels were supposed to be secured in the Tower of London, catalogued and protected. What were they doing here in the middle of the night, spread across this desk? "Your Majesty," he said carefully, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I need you to explain what these items are doing here." Camilla closed the door behind them and moved to stand near the desk, her hand resting protectively near the jewels. "You do not understand the situation, Captain Reed. Then help me understand. These jewels belong to the crown. They should not be here." Marcus kept his tone respectful but firm. This was beyond a simple security matter now. They were brought here under proper authority, Camilla said, but her voice lacked the confidence it had held moments before. I was asked to review them. By whom? And why in the middle of the night? Marcus pulled out his radio. I am going to have to report this, Your Majesty. You must understand that. Camilla's face paled. Please, Captain. Give me a moment to explain before you do anything hasty. There are things you do not know, circumstances that make this situation more complex than it appears. Marcus hesitated, his finger hovering over the radio button. 15 years of service had taught him to follow protocol without question. But those same 15 years had also taught him that royal affairs were rarely straightforward. He had seen enough palace intrigue to know that jumping to conclusions could have serious consequences. You have 5 minutes, he said finally, lowering the radio but not putting it away. And then I call this in, regardless of your explanation. Camilla nodded, relief flickering across her features. She moved to the window, gazing out at the rain-soaked gardens before turning back to face him. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost sad. The late Queen and I, we had our differences. The whole world knows that. But in her final months, something changed between us. She called me to Balmoral last summer, just the two of us. We talked for hours about many things. About family, about duty, about the weight of the crown. Marcus listened, his eyes moving between Camilla and the glittering jewels on the desk. He had heard rumors of a thawing in relations between the two women, but nothing concrete. Before she died, she gave me something. A key and a letter. She asked me to do something for her. Something she could not ask anyone else to do. Something that had to remain private until the time was right. Camilla's voice broke slightly. These jewels are part of that request. Marcus felt the situation shifting, becoming more complicated with every word. What kind of request? Before Camilla could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Multiple sets moving quickly. The door burst open and 3 more guards entered, followed by a man in civilian clothes Marcus recognized as one of the king's private secretaries. Thomas stood among them, looking guilty. He had called for backup despite Marcus's silence. The secretary's eyes widened as he took in the scene. The jewels, the open cases, Camilla standing pale and caught. His face went from shock to something harder, more calculating. Your Majesty, he said slowly, his voice cold. I think you have a great deal of explaining to do. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Marcus looked at Camilla and saw fear in her eyes now, real and unmistakable. Whatever she had been about to tell him, whatever secret the late Queen had entrusted her with, was about to be exposed under circumstances neither of them could control. And as more footsteps approached from the hallway, Marcus realized that this night was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The private secretary, Lord William Ashford, stood in the doorway with an expression that could freeze water. Behind him, the guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure of their role in what was rapidly becoming a crisis beyond their training. Marcus felt the temperature in the room drop as Ashford's gaze moved from the jewels to Camilla and back again. I can explain, Camilla began, but Ashford raised his hand sharply. I'm quite certain you can, Your Majesty. However, explanations at this hour, under these circumstances, may prove rather difficult for everyone involved. His voice was smooth, controlled, but there was steel beneath it. Captain Reed, I need a full report of what you observed upon entering this room. Marcus straightened. Sir, I was conducting a routine security inspection when I heard sounds from this floor. Upon investigation, I found Her Majesty in the study with the items you see before you. She was in the process of explaining the situation when you arrived. And did this explanation satisfy you? Ashford's eyes were sharp, missing nothing. I had not yet heard it in full, sir. Ashford nodded slowly, then turned his attention back to Camilla. Your Majesty, these pieces belong to the royal collection. The coronation necklace alone is valued at over £3 million. They are catalogued, insured, and most importantly, they are kept under strict security at the tower. How did they come to be here, spread across your desk like costume jewelry? Camilla drew herself up to her full height, some of her earlier composure returning. Lord Ashford, I am aware of the value of these items. I am also aware that I am the Queen Consort and I do not answer to you. However, given the circumstances, I will explain. These jewels were delivered to me this afternoon under proper authorization. I have been reviewing them as part of a private matter concerning the late Queen's wishes. Authorization from whom? Ashford pulled out his phone. Because I can assure you, any movement of crown jewels requires multiple signatures, including mine, and I signed no such order. The silence that followed was heavy. Marcus watched as Camilla's confidence wavered. She moved to the desk and picked up a folded piece of paper from beneath the inventory book. "This is a letter from Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth," Camilla said quietly, "written to me in her own hand, dated 3 weeks before she died. In it, she asks me to undertake a specific task regarding these jewels. A private task, one that she wished to remain confidential." Ashford crossed the room in 3 quick strides and held out his hand. "I will need to see that." Camilla held the letter close. "This is a personal correspondence between myself and the late Queen. It is private. Your Majesty, with all due respect, when crown property is involved, there is no such thing as private. You are in possession of items that belong to the nation. If you have authorization, you must produce it now." Marcus could see Camilla weighing her options. The standoff stretched for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. Finally, she handed over the letter. Ashford unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. Marcus noticed his expression change several times as he read, surprise and confusion crossing his features. When he finished, he looked up at Camilla with new uncertainty. "This is certainly the late Queen's handwriting," he said slowly. "However, the contents are, how shall I say, irregular. She asks you to examine certain pieces from her personal collection and to make determinations about their future without consulting the usual channels." He paused. "Did you show this letter to anyone before taking possession of the jewels?" "No. The letter specifically requested confidentiality." "And how did you obtain the jewels from the tower without going through proper protocols?" For the first time, Camilla looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I used the key the Queen gave me. There is a private access she arranged, one that bypasses the normal security checks. She explained it to me in the letter, said it was for emergencies and for this specific purpose." Ashford's face went pale. "You are telling me there is an unauthorized access point to the crown jewels that bypasses all our security protocols? And the late Queen created it?" "It was not unauthorized. She was the Queen. She was the Queen. But even she could not simply create secret passages to our most valuable treasures without informing anyone." Ashford ran his hand through his hair, his usual composure cracking. This is unprecedented. I need to call the king immediately." "No," Camilla said firmly. "You will not disturb His Majesty at this hour with incomplete information. The letter explains everything. If you would simply read it more carefully instead of jumping to conclusions." "I have read it, Your Majesty. What I see is a letter that, while genuine, asks you to undertake actions that bypass every protocol we have, actions that could be misinterpreted in any number of ways." Ashford looked at Marcus and the other guards. "I need everyone except Captain Reed to step outside. Now." The guards filed out quickly, Thomas throwing Marcus a worried glance before disappearing down the hallway. When the door closed, Ashford turned back to the room's remaining occupants. "Captain Reed stays because he is the senior officer and discovered the situation. He needs to be part of any resolution." Ashford moved closer to the desk, examining the jewels more carefully. "Your Majesty, I want to believe you. I served the late Queen for 20 years, and I know she was capable of making arrangements others might not understand. But you must see how this looks. The Queen Consort, alone at midnight, with some of the most valuable items in the royal collection, claiming secret authorization that nobody else knows about. I see exactly how it looks, Lord Ashford, but I also know the truth." Camilla's voice was steadier now. "The late Queen asked me to review these specific pieces because they had personal significance to her. Some were gifts from her late husband. Others had family history she wanted preserved in a particular way. She was making arrangements for after her death, ensuring certain items would go where she wished them to go. But that is what wills and proper documentation are for," Ashford protested. "Not when the wishes conflict with royal protocol," Camilla said quietly. "Not when she wanted certain items to go to people who, according to official channels, should not receive them." This statement hung in the air like a bomb. Marcus saw Ashford's expression shift from anger to concern. "Who?" Ashford asked. "Who did she want these items to go to?" Camilla hesitated, then picked up the inventory book. She opened it to a marked page and turned it so both men could see. There, in neat handwriting, was a list of jewels and names beside them. Marcus leaned in slightly to read and felt his pulse quicken as he recognized some of the names. Princess Anne's name was there, next to several pieces. That was normal enough. But below it was Princess Beatrice, and next to her name, a brooch Marcus recognized from official photographs. Further down the list were names that made less sense. Sarah, Duchess of York, Lady Louise Windsor, and at the bottom, written in slightly shakier handwriting as if added later, was a name that made both men stare. Harry. Ashford read aloud. She wanted some of these to go to Prince Harry? Specifically pieces that belonged to his mother, Camilla said softly. Items that came to the late Queen after Diana's death. She felt they should be returned to him, for his daughters. The implications of this were staggering. Prince Harry had left the royal family amid great tension. His relationship with his father and brother was fractured. The idea that the late Queen had wanted to give him jewelry, especially pieces connected to Princess Diana, would create enormous complications. This is why she could not go through official channels, Camilla continued. This is why she asked me to handle it privately. She knew the palace would never approve such distributions. She knew the press would turn it into a circus. She wanted it done quietly, respectfully, in accordance with her wishes but without causing more family drama. Ashford sank into a chair, the letter still in his hand. This is impossible. Even if her intentions were good, we cannot simply redistribute crown property based on a private letter. There are laws, protocols, insurance issues. The king would need to approve any such transfers. And will he? Camilla asked. Will King Charles approve gifts to his estranged son? Will he honor his mother's wishes if they complicate his own relationship with his family? That is not for us to speculate about, Ashford said. But his voice lacked conviction. Marcus had remained silent throughout this exchange, his role as observer and protector keeping him apart from the political implications. But now he spoke up. If I may, sir. The Queen Consort was following the late Queen's wishes. Regardless of how complicated those wishes might be, her intentions were honorable. Should that not count for something? Ashford looked at him sharply. Captain Reed, you are here to report what you saw, not to offer opinions on royal matters. With respect, sir, what I saw was someone trying to honor a private request from a dying woman. The method may have been unorthodox, but the motive appears genuine. A soft knock interrupted them. One of the guards opened the door slightly. Sir, there are people arriving. Palace officials, someone from the Royal Collection Trust. They were notified of a security incident. Ashford closed his eyes briefly. Of course they were. Thomas probably reported everything before I could contain it. He stood, straightening his jacket. Your Majesty, I need to secure these jewels. By dawn, Clarence House had transformed into a command center. Palace officials, security personnel, and representatives from the Royal Collection Trust filled the downstairs rooms, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Marcus stood guard outside the study, which had been sealed pending a full investigation. The jewels remained inside, photographed and documented by experts who had arrived in the early morning hours. Camilla had been escorted to her private chambers by her own security detail. She was not under arrest, but there was an understanding that she should remain available for questioning. Lord Ashford had disappeared into a private office to make calls, including one to Buckingham Palace that Marcus imagined was not going well. Quite a night, Captain. The voice came from Marcus's left. He turned to see Margaret Thornley, director of the Royal Collection Trust, approaching with 2 steaming cups of coffee. She offered one to him with a tired smile. I thought you might need this. Thank you, ma'am. Marcus accepted gratefully. He had been on duty for nearly 8 hours without a break. Margaret was in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for being utterly unflappable. She had managed the royal collection through 3 monarchs and countless scandals. If anyone could navigate the situation, it was her. I have reviewed the inventory, she said, keeping her voice low. 23 pieces in total, each one properly catalogued from Her late Majesty's personal collection. Not the crown jewels themselves, thankfully, but items that were her private property. Does that change the situation? Marcus asked. Legally, perhaps. The late Queen had more latitude with her personal collection than with crown property. But politically, Margaret shook her head. This is a nightmare. The press will have a field day once this leaks. And it will leak. These things always do. Have you read the letter? Marcus asked carefully. I have, multiple times. Margaret took a sip of her coffee, her expression thoughtful. It is genuine. I would stake my career on it. The handwriting, the paper, even the specific way she references certain pieces. It is all consistent with the late Queen's private correspondence. But Marcus sensed there was more, but the timing is suspicious. The letter is dated 3 weeks before her death. She was quite ill by then, though few people knew how serious it was. There are questions about whether she was in the right frame of mind to make such decisions. Margaret paused. And then there is the matter of the access key. The secret passage to the tower. It is not quite as dramatic as that sounds. There is a private inventory room established decades ago for exactly this purpose, to allow the monarch to review personal items without the full security theater. King George VI created it after World War II. But it has not been used in years, and most people have forgotten it exists. The fact that the late Queen remembered it and trusted someone else with the access, that is significant. A commotion at the front entrance drew their attention. Voices were raised, and Marcus recognized one of them immediately. He groaned internally. "That sounds like Sir Geoffrey Hartwell," Margaret said with a grimace. "Just what we need." Sir Geoffrey was the king's senior legal counsel, a man known for his rigid interpretation of royal protocol and his deep suspicion of anyone who deviated from established procedure. He swept into the entrance hall like a storm cloud, his assistant struggling to keep pace behind him. "Where is she?" he demanded, spotting Lord Ashford emerging from the office. "Where is the Queen Consort?" "In her chambers, Sir Geoffrey," Ashford replied wearily. "And I would appreciate if we could all lower our voices and handle this with some discretion." Discretion? Geoffrey's voice was incredulous. "The Queen Consort has been found in possession of royal jewels in the middle of the night, apparently having bypassed every security protocol we have in place, and you want discretion? I need to speak with her immediately, and I need to see these jewels and this supposed letter from the late Queen." "The jewels are secured in the study," Margaret interjected, stepping forward, "and I can assure you the letter is authentic. I have already verified it." "You can assure me, can you, Ms. Thornley?" "Forgive me if I require more than assurances at this point. The integrity of the royal collection is at stake. The reputation of the crown is at stake." Geoffrey turned to Marcus. "You are the guard who discovered this situation?" "Captain Marcus Reed, sir." "Yes, I was conducting a security inspection when I found Her Majesty in the study." "And what was her demeanor when you entered? Was she startled, guilty? Did she attempt to hide anything?" Marcus chose his words carefully. "She was surprised by my arrival. She initially attempted to dismiss me but complied when I insisted on examining the room. She explained that she was reviewing the jewels under authorization from the late Queen." "Authorization that no one else knew about," Geoffrey said pointedly. "How convenient." "Sir Geoffrey," Margaret said sharply, "I understand your concern, but jumping to conclusions helps no one. The late Queen was entitled to make arrangements for her personal property. The letter outlines her wishes clearly. Then let me read this miraculous letter." Geoffrey held out his hand impatiently. Lord Ashford produced a folder from his briefcase. "I have had copies made for all the relevant parties. The original is being preserved as evidence." "Evidence of what exactly?" Camilla's voice cut through the tension. She stood at the top of the stairs, dressed impeccably despite the early hour. Her expression was composed, but Marcus could see the strain around her eyes. "Evidence that I committed some crime? Or evidence that I was trying to honor a dying woman's wishes?" Geoffrey looked up at her, his face unreadable. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should speak in private." "No, Sir Geoffrey. Anything you have to say can be said here. I am tired of secrets and whispered conversations. The late Queen asked me to do something difficult, and I attempted to do it. If that was wrong, if I have violated some protocol or law, then say so publicly, but do not suggest in veiled terms that I am some sort of thief." The room fell silent. Camilla descended the stairs slowly, her bearing regal despite the circumstances. When she reached the bottom, she looked directly at Geoffrey. "I have served this family for decades," she said quietly, "through scandals that would have destroyed lesser people. I have been vilified, mocked, and blamed for things I did not do. But I have never stolen anything, and I have never betrayed a trust. When Queen Elizabeth asked me to help her settle some private matters, I agreed because she asked, and because it was the right thing to do." Geoffrey's expression softened slightly. He opened the folder and began to read the letter. The room waited in tense silence as his eyes moved down the page. Finally, he looked up. "This is, without question, the late Queen's writing. The phrasing, The specific references to family matters, only she would have known these details. He paused, but the implications are staggering. If we follow through with these distributions, it will reopen old wounds. The Prince of Wales, Prince Harry, the entire family dynamic that has been so carefully managed, it will all be thrown into chaos again. Perhaps that is what she wanted, Camilla suggested. Perhaps she felt that some wounds needed to be reopened in order to properly heal. Perhaps she knew that keeping silent about her wishes would only make things worse in the long run. Or perhaps, Jeffrey countered, she was ill and not thinking clearly about the consequences of her decisions. You did not know her at the end, Camilla said, her voice breaking slightly. I did. We spent hours talking. She was frail, yes, but her mind was sharp until the very end. She knew exactly what she was asking me to do and why. Margaret stepped forward again. Might I suggest we focus on the immediate practical matters? The jewels need to be secured and returned to proper storage. The letter and its contents need to be presented to the king so he can make an informed decision about how to proceed. Everything else can wait until we have more information. The king is being briefed as we speak, Lord Ashford said. I spoke with his private secretary an hour ago. He is understandably shocked by these developments. Does he believe I am guilty of wrongdoing? Camilla asked directly. Ashford hesitated. He is reserving judgment until he can speak with you personally. He has requested that you remain here until he can arrange to meet with you later today. So I am effectively under house arrest. You are being asked to remain available for consultation, Jeffrey corrected. There is a difference, Camilla laughed bitterly. Of course there is. How foolish of me to confuse the two. Marcus watched this exchange with growing discomfort. He was a soldier, trained to follow orders and protect people, not to navigate the complex politics of royal families. But something about the situation bothered him. Camilla's pain seemed genuine. Her explanation made sense, and the late queen had clearly trusted her with something important. If I may speak, sir, he said, addressing Jeffrey, I was the first person to encounter this situation. I have served in the royal guard for 15 years, and I have learned to read people. The queen consort was not behaving like someone who had been caught doing something wrong. She was behaving like someone who had been interrupted while trying to complete a difficult task. Jeffrey looked at him with surprise. Captain Reed, your opinion on the matter is noted, but not particularly relevant. We have procedures for handling situations like they. King Charles arrived at Clarence House just before noon, entering through a private entrance to avoid the press that had already begun to gather outside. Marcus, who had been relieved from duty, but asked to remain available for questioning, watched from a window as the king's car pulled into the courtyard. Even from a distance, he could see the tension in the monarch's posture. The meeting between the king and queen consort took place behind closed doors in Camilla's private sitting room. Marcus was stationed outside along with 2 other guards. For nearly 2 hours, they could hear only muffled voices, sometimes raised, sometimes quiet. Once they heard what sounded like crying, though Marcus could not tell who it was. When the door finally opened, the king emerged looking older than he had just hours before. His face was drawn, his eyes red. He paused in the doorway and looked back at Camilla, who stood near the window, her own face streaked with tears. We will resolve this, he said quietly. I promise you we will find a way. Camilla nodded but said nothing. The king turned to Lord Ashford, who had been waiting in the hall. Gather everyone involved in this matter. I want them in the library in 10 minutes. And I mean everyone, the legal counsel, the collection trust director, the guards who were present. Everyone. 10 minutes later, Marcus found himself standing among a group of officials in the Grand Library. The king sat at the head of a long table, the letter from his late mother spread out before him. Camilla sat to his right, composed now but clearly exhausted. Sir Geoffrey, Lord Ashford, and Margaret Thornley occupied the other seats. I have read my mother's letter multiple times, the king began, his voice formal but strained. I have also spoken at length with the queen consort about the circumstances surrounding these jewels. What I am about to say stays in this room. Is that understood? Everyone nodded. My mother wrote this letter knowing she had limited time left. She was in considerable pain, but, as Miss Thornley has confirmed, completely lucid. The arrangements she requested were irregular, yes, but they were made with full awareness of their implications. She chose to entrust this task to the queen consort because she believed, correctly it seems, that going through official channels would result in these wishes being blocked or delayed indefinitely. Sir Geoffrey shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, with all respect, the late Queen may not have fully understood the legal complexities involved in redistributing Crown property. These were not Crown jewels, Sir Geoffrey. They were pieces from her personal collection, items she had every right to dispose of as she wished. The fact that some of those wishes conflict with current family dynamics does not make them invalid. The King's voice was firm. But Your Majesty, Geoffrey persisted. The individuals named in the letter, some of them are well. They are not currently in favor with the family. Sending them valuable jewelry, especially items connected to Princess Diana, will send a message that could be misinterpreted. Or it could send exactly the message my mother intended. The King said quietly. She told me something before she died. She said that holding grudges was a luxury the royal family could no longer afford. She said that history would judge us not by our titles but by how we treated our own family members. This revelation hung in the air. Marcus saw several people exchange glances, clearly surprised by the King's words. There is something else you should know, Camilla said, speaking for the first time. Something the letter does not make explicit but that Queen Elizabeth explained to me in person. These jewels, the ones designated for Harry, they were not just random pieces. They were specifically items that Diana wore, items that appeared in photographs of her with her sons. The Queen saved them, kept them separate from the rest of the collection because she always intended for them to go back to Diana's children eventually. Why not give them to William then? Lord Ashford asked. He is the heir, and Diana was his mother too. William has access to the entire royal collection, Camilla explained. He can wear, display, or gift any piece he wishes. Harry has nothing. The Queen felt that was unjust, regardless of the circumstances that led to his departure from royal life. These were his mother's things. She wanted him to have them for his daughters, for Lilibet and Archie to know their grandmother. Margaret spoke up. If I may, Your Majesty, there is historical precedent for this. When Princess Margaret died, many of her personal jewels were distributed according to her wishes, not according to protocol. Some went to her children, others to friends she wished to remember. The late Queen honored those wishes even when they were, shall we say, unconventional. That is an excellent point, the King said. My mother understood that family was more important than protocol. She demonstrated that repeatedly throughout her reign. But how do we implement this? Geoffrey asked, his resistance clearly weakening. If we simply send these items to Prince Harry without explanation, it will cause speculation. If we explain that they were the late Queen's wishes, it will raise questions about why they were not included in her official will. Then we tell the truth, the King said simply. We explain that these were personal items that my mother wished to distribute privately, and we are honoring those wishes. If people speculate, let them speculate. We cannot control public opinion, but we can control whether we do the right thing. A silence fell over the room. Marcus could see the officials processing this, weighing the implications against their instincts for caution and protocol. Finally, Margaret spoke again. There is one practical matter we should address. The inventory book that the Queen Consort was using, it contains notes beyond just the distribution list. The late Queen apparently wrote detailed histories of several pieces, including who gave them to her and under what circumstances. If we are going to distribute these items, those histories should go with them. They add meaning and context. May I see the book? The King asked. Camilla produced it from a drawer in the table. The King opened it carefully, his fingers tracing his mother's handwriting. Marcus watched as the monarch's expression changed while reading, moving from pain to wonder to something that looked like resolution. Listen to this, the King said, reading aloud. The sapphire brooch given to me by Philip on our 10th anniversary. I wore it the day William was born. Diana borrowed it for Harry's christening and looked so beautiful. I want Harry to have it for his daughters. Tell him it is from their grandmother Diana and their great-grandmother, both of whom loved them more than words can say. The King's voice broke as he finished reading. He closed the book carefully and looked around the table. How can anyone question whether these were her true wishes? She wrote these notes knowing she might not have time to complete the distribution herself. She entrusted them to someone she believed would see it through. The Queen Consort took on that burden at considerable personal risk, and instead of thanking her, we have spent the morning questioning her integrity. Camilla reached over and placed her hand on his. You did not know the full context. None of us did, but now we do, and we can move forward. There is one more thing, she continued, her voice hesitant. The Queen told me something else, something she made me promise not to reveal unless absolutely necessary. I think we have reached that point. Everyone waited. Camilla took a deep breath before continuing. She had tried to arrange this through proper channels. 2 years ago, she spoke with her private secretary about wanting to give certain items to Harry. She was told it would be inappropriate given his departure from royal duties. She was advised that such gifts would undermine the family's public position. So she stopped asking officially and began planning this alternative approach. Lord Ashford looked stricken. I was her private secretary 2 years ago. Are you saying she came to me with this request and I refused? Not you specifically, Camilla said gently. She never named the secretary, but she told me that the refusal hurt her deeply. She felt that the institution she had served for so long was preventing her from being a grandmother. That is why she created this alternative plan. She was not trying to undermine protocol. She was trying to find a way to be both queen and grandmother even after her death. The room was silent. Marcus felt privileged and uncomfortable in equal measure to witness these revelations. This was not the polished public face of royalty, but the messy, complicated reality of a family trying to navigate impossible expectations. We will honor my mother's wishes, the king said finally, his voice firm now. All of them. Margaret, you will oversee the proper documentation and distribution of these items. Sir Geoffrey, you will ensure that everything is done legally and that we have adequate records. Lord Ashford, you will draft a statement explaining that we are executing the late Queen's private bequests. And Captain Reed, Marcus straightened. Yes, Your Majesty. Your discretion tonight, your willingness to give the Queen Consort a chance to explain before jumping to conclusions, that showed good judgment. I am told you also spoke up when others were ready to assume the worst. That took courage. You will receive a commendation, and I am personally requesting that you be assigned to special duties related to protecting sensitive family matters. We need more people who understand that loyalty means doing the right thing, not just the expedient thing. Marcus felt his face flew. 3 days after the confrontation at Clarence House, Marcus found himself in an unusual assignment. He had been asked to accompany Margaret Thornley to a private meeting at Buckingham Palace. The purpose remained vague, but he understood it involved the distribution of the late Queen's jewels. They met in a small office that Marcus had never visited before, tucked away in a corner of the palace rarely seen by anyone outside the immediate royal family. Present were the king, Camilla, Margaret, Lord Ashford, and surprisingly, Prince William. The Prince of Wales looked tired, his famous smile absent. He nodded to everyone as he took his seat, his posture formal and guarded. Marcus noticed the tension in the room immediately. This was not a friendly family gathering. Thank you all for coming, the king began. William insisted on being part of this discussion before we proceed with the distributions. I felt that was reasonable. William leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. I need to understand this situation fully. My grandmother left instructions to give pieces of our mother's jewelry to Harry, pieces that I was told years ago would remain in the family collection for everyone to share. Why the change? Why the secrecy? Camilla looked at the king, who nodded for her to explain. She took a breath before speaking. Your grandmother never intended to keep those pieces from you, William. But she felt strongly that Harry and his children should have something tangible of Diana's, especially since he chose to leave. She did not want him to feel that leaving the royal family meant losing all connection to his mother's memory. But he did leave, William said, his voice controlled but edged with emotion. He made that choice. He gave interview after interview criticizing the family, the institution, everything we stand for, and now we are supposed to reward that behavior with priceless jewelry? It is not a reward, the king said gently. It is a grandmother's love for her grandson, regardless of his choices. Your grandmother believed that holding on to anger and withholding love were luxuries we could not afford. Not as a family, and especially not as the royal family. William stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to the room. I loved Granny. I respected her more than anyone. But this feels like she was taking sides, choosing Harry over me. She was not choosing anyone over anyone, Camilla said, her voice soft but firm. She spoke to me at length about both of you. She loved you both equally but differently. You have the crown, William. You have the responsibility, yes, but also the privilege and the platform. Harry has nothing of that. She felt he needed this connection to his mother more than you did. Did she say that? William turned back to face them. Did she actually say I did not need those pieces? Margaret spoke up. If I may, Your Royal Highness, I have reviewed the inventory book extensively. The late Queen made notes about each piece and why she designated it for particular people. For the items going to Prince Harry, she specifically mentioned that they were pieces Diana wore when the boys were young. Pieces that would have strong memories for both of you. But she also noted that you have access to thousands of items in the royal collection, including many that belonged to your mother. Prince Harry has access to none of those. William returned to his seat slowly. May I see the inventory book? Camilla handed it to him. Marcus watched as the prince read through his grandmother's notes, his expression shifting from anger to sadness, to something that looked like understanding. When he reached the page about the sapphire brooch, he stopped reading and simply stared at the words. I remember this brooch, William said quietly. Mum wore it to Harry's christening. There are photographs. Granny had it on her dresser at Balmoral for years after Mum died. I asked her about it once, and she told me she kept it there to feel close to both of them. She wanted Harry to have it for his daughters, Camilla said. She wanted them to know their grandmother Diana, even though they will never meet her. William closed the book carefully. This changes things. If I had known Granny's reasoning, if I had understood her perspective, I would not have objected. But I do have concerns about how this will be perceived publicly. What are your concerns specifically? The king asked. The press will say we are trying to buy Harry back, or worse, that we feel guilty about how things ended and are trying to make amends with jewelry instead of actual reconciliation. Either narrative makes us look weak. Lord Ashford spoke for the first time. I have been working on a statement that addresses those concerns. It emphasizes that these distributions were planned before the late Queen's death, that they represent her personal wishes for her private property, and that they are part of a broader effort to honor her memory by executing her final requests. We do not mention Prince Harry specifically. We simply note that various family members and individuals close to the late Queen will receive items she designated for them. That could work, William conceded. But there is another issue. If we give Harry these items, particularly the ones connected to our mother, it will reopen questions about our relationship. People will want to know if this means we are reconciling, if he is coming back to the family, if we have forgiven him for everything he said. The king looked at his son steadily. Have you forgiven him? The question hung in the air. William looked down at his hands. I do not know, Father. Some days I think I have. Other days I read something new, some interview or revelation, and the anger comes back. He hurt us, hurt the family, hurt Granny in her final years. How do I forgive that? By remembering that he is still your brother, Camilla said gently, and that your grandmother loved both of you despite everything. She did not let the family drama change her love. Perhaps we should follow her example. William looked at her with an expression Marcus could not quite read. You and Granny, you became close at the end. I know that, I saw it. What did she tell you about all of this? About Harry? About the rift in the family? Camilla glanced at the king, who nodded permission. She told me that the saddest part of her long life was watching families tear themselves apart over things that would not matter in 50 years. She said she had seen it happen repeatedly, in her own family and in other royal houses, and it never ended well. She was determined not to let it happen to you and Harry if she could prevent it. But she could not prevent it, William said. It already happened. Harry left. He chose his own path. He did, Camilla agreed. But that does not mean the path back is permanently closed. Your grandmother believed that giving him these pieces of your mother's jewelry was a way of leaving that path open, a gesture of love and inclusion, even when he felt excluded from everything else. Silence filled the room. Marcus could see William struggling with this, weighing his grandmother's wishes against his own hurt and anger. Finally, the prince spoke again. I will support this distribution, not because I have forgiven everything, and not because I think it will magically fix our relationship, but because Granny asked for it and she deserves to have her wishes honored. However, I want to make one request of my own. What request? The king asked. I want to personally deliver some of the items to Harry. Not all of them, just a few. The sapphire brooch in particular. I want to look my brother in the eye and tell him these come from our grandmother, who loved us both. I want him to understand that this is not about politics or public relations. This is about family, The suggestion caught everyone by surprise. The king sat back in his chair, clearly processing the implications. Camilla looked hopeful but cautious. "William," the king said slowly, "that is a generous gesture, but are you certain? If it goes badly, if you and Harry argue, it could make things worse, not better." "It could," William admitted, "but it could also be the beginning of something better. Granny was willing to take a risk with these distributions. Maybe I should be willing to take a risk too." Margaret spoke up. "From a practical standpoint, personal delivery would eliminate several security and insurance complications. And it would allow for the kind of private personal exchange the late Queen clearly intended." The king looked at Camilla. "What do you think?" "I think," she said carefully, "that this is exactly the kind of thing your mother would have wanted. Not just the distribution of the jewels, but the opportunity for reconciliation, the chance for her grandsons to connect over their shared love for her and for their mother. Then we proceed with Prince William's suggestion," the king decided. "William will travel to deliver the items personally. We will arrange appropriate security and ensure the press does not learn of the visit in advance. This will be private as Mother wished." As the meeting concluded and people began to leave, Marcus found himself holding the door as William passed. The prince paused and looked at him. "You were the guard who found all of this, were you not?" "Captain Reed?" "Yes, Your Royal Highness. My father told me you gave the Queen Consort a chance to explain before calling in the cavalry. That took judgment. Thank you for that. If you had not been fair-minded, this whole situation might have exploded before we could understand what was really happening." "I was just doing my duty, sir." "Your duty as you saw it," William echoed his father's earlier words. "That is all any of us can do. See our duty and try to do it honestly." He smiled slightly. "Even when it is complicated and messy and might blow up in our face." 6 weeks after that stormy night at Clarence House, Marcus stood in the same private office at Buckingham Palace. This time, the atmosphere was completely different. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and there was a lightness in the air that had been absent during the previous tense meetings. Present were the king, Camilla, Margaret Thornley, and Lord Ashford. They were reviewing the final documentation of the jewel distributions. Most had already been completed. Princess Anne had received several pieces her mother had designated for her. Lady Louise Windsor had been given a pearl necklace the late Queen had promised her years ago. Sarah, Duchess of York, had received a brooch that had once belonged to Queen Mary, a gesture of reconciliation that had moved everyone involved. But everyone knew the most important distribution was still to come. Prince William's visit to California to see his brother. "He left this morning," the king said, looking at his watch. "He should be landing in about 8 hours. I admit I am anxious about how it will go." "William is prepared," Camilla assured him. "We spoke at length before he left. He understands that this is not about fixing everything in one conversation. It is about taking a first step, honoring his grandmother's wishes and leaving the door open for the future." Margaret placed a file on the table. "I have the final inventory here. 7 pieces total going to Prince Harry. The sapphire brooch, Princess Diana's pearl earrings, a gold bracelet with the boy's birthstones, 2 rings Diana wore regularly, and 2 necklaces that appear in multiple family photographs. Each piece has been documented with the late Queen's notes about their history and significance. Has there been any press speculation?" Lord Ashford asked. "Any leaks about the visit?" "None so far. We have kept the circle of knowledge very small. William is traveling with minimal security, staying at a private residence arranged through trusted contacts. No one outside this room and the immediate security detail knows the real purpose of his visit." The king nodded. "Good, let us hope it stays that way. Mother would have wanted this to be private. Family business conducted away from cameras and speculation." Marcus had been asked to attend this meeting because the king wanted to formally recognize his role in how the situation had unfolded. As the others discussed logistics, he found himself thinking back to that rainy night. So much had changed in 6 weeks. What had seemed like a scandal had transformed into something else entirely. A story about love, family, and the complicated work of honoring the dead while protecting the living. "Captain Reed." The king's voice brought him back to the present. "You have been unusually quiet. Do you have any concerns about the security arrangements for Prince William's visit?" "No, Your Majesty. The advance team has done excellent work. I was just reflecting on how far we have come since that night at Clarence House. It seemed impossible then that we would reach this point. It did it not? Camilla smiled. I remember standing in that study, surrounded by jewels and officials, thinking my entire life was about to implode. And here we are actually fulfilling the late Queen's wishes. You took a tremendous risk, Margaret said, using that private access, moving those jewels without going through official channels. If this had gone differently, the consequences could have been severe. I know, Camilla replied, but Queen Elizabeth asked me to do it. She trusted me when she had no reason to, especially given our history. I could not let her down, even if it meant risking my reputation. The king reached over and took her hand. Mother knew what she was doing when she chose you for this task. She needed someone who understood what it meant to be an outsider, someone who would not be bound by the usual protocols and expectations. You were the perfect person for it, even if neither of us understood that at the time. A phone buzzed on the table. Lord Ashford picked it up and read the message, his expression carefully neutral. William has boarded the plane. He is traveling with the jewels in a secure case, accompanied by 2 protection officers. Everything is proceeding according to plan. The king stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. I wonder what she would think, watching all of this unfold. Would she be pleased that we are finally doing as she asked, or worried about what happens next? She would be pleased, Camilla said firmly. She would see that her grandsons are trying, that the family is attempting to heal rather than letting wounds fester. That is all she ever wanted. The meeting concluded shortly after, with final details confirmed and contingency plans reviewed. As Marcus prepared to leave, the king called him back. Captain Reed, I want to thank you properly for your discretion and judgment throughout this matter. Not many people would have given the Queen Consort a chance to explain before sounding the alarm. Your restraint allowed us to understand the situation fully, rather than jumping to conclusions. I was trained to assess situations before acting, Your Majesty. It seemed appropriate to apply that training. It was more than that. You chose to see the person behind the title, to recognize that the Queen Consort might have a legitimate explanation, rather than assuming the worst. That required character as well as training. The king paused. I am appointing you to the Royal Protection Command with a special focus on sensitive family matters. We need people who can think rather than just follow procedures. Are you interested? Marcus felt a surge of pride. Yes, Your Majesty. I would be honored. Good. You will receive your official appointment papers next week. In the meantime, I want you to continue monitoring the security aspects of Prince William's visit. Report directly to me if there are any concerns. As Marcus left the palace that afternoon, he found himself thinking about the strange journey that had begun with a routine security check. He had stumbled into a family drama that stretched back generations, a story of love and loss, conflict and reconciliation, and somehow, by simply doing his job with fairness and compassion, he had helped move that story toward a better ending. 2 days later, Marcus received a call from Lord Ashford. Prince William had returned from California. The visit had gone well, better than anyone had dared hope. The brothers had spent hours talking, not just about the jewels, but about their grandmother, their mother, and their complicated shared history. They cried together, Ashford told him. William said they held their mother's jewelry and remembered her together for the first time in years. It was not a complete reconciliation. Too much has happened for that. But it was a beginning, and that is what the late Queen wanted, a beginning. A week after that, the palace released a brief statement. It noted that the late Queen Elizabeth had left specific instructions for the distribution of certain personal items from her collection. These distributions had now been completed in accordance with her wishes. The statement thanked those who had helped execute these final requests and emphasized that the matter was private and would not be discussed further. The press, of course, tried to dig deeper. There was speculation about who had received what and why certain distributions had been kept secret. But without concrete information, the story faded after a few days. Other scandals, other headlines took over. The late Queen's final act of love for her family remained mostly private, just as she had intended. Marcus continued his duties with the Royal Guard, now with the added responsibilities of his new position. He found himself involved in other delicate situations, other moments when judgment and discretion were more important than strict adherence to protocol. Each time he thought back to that rainy night and the choice he had made to listen before acting. 6 months after the jewel incident, Marcus was assigned a security detail for a private family gathering at Sandringham. It was the first time Prince Harry had returned to Britain since William's visit to California. The press knew he was in the country, but had been kept away from the actual gathering. Marcus saw the brothers arrive separately and watched as they greeted each other in the entrance hall. There was still awkwardness, still distance in their body language, but there was also something new, a careful warmth, a willingness to try. Later that evening, as Marcus conducted his rounds, he passed an open door and glimpsed the family gathered in a sitting room. William and Harry stood near the fireplace talking quietly. Camilla sat nearby with Catherine, the Princess of Wales. The king watched his sons with an expression Marcus had never seen before, something between hope and peace. On a side table, Marcus noticed a familiar sapphire brooch pinned to a velvet cushion, displayed like the precious object it was, the late queen's gift, still bringing her family together even after her death. That night, as Marcus completed his shift and prepared to head home, he found Camilla standing alone on the terrace, looking out over the darkened gardens. "Your Majesty," he said, approaching carefully, "is everything all right?" She turned and smiled. "Everything is fine, Captain Reed, better than fine, actually. I was just thinking about Queen Elizabeth and how pleased she would be to see this." Her grandsons talking again, the family beginning to heal. She planned all of this, you know. Not just the jewels, but the opportunity for reconciliation they would create. She was a wise woman, Marcus said. She was. And she was right to trust that it would work out, even when it seemed impossible. Even when we were all standing in that study at midnight, surround,